Today I feel African. Today I feel gay.
Welcome to Silly Wales. This is a mental health podcast. This is a show that is for everyone, but it might not be for you. What do I mean by that? What do I actually mean by that? I mean, we discuss things to do with mental health and mental illness, and if you're not in the mood to hear that, that's okay. Which is why I say the show is for everyone. The door is always open, but it's okay if you want to be the one to close it. You know, just as I gaze longingly, hoping that you'll open it one day.
Ooh.
And then we just drift, we just drift apart. Anyway.
No, go back to that really sad stuff. That's what I'm feeling right now. Just go back
that's
to
that's his
go
whole
back
show.
to that.
Oh, God. I feel like I'm drifting away from everything.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. Let's get somewhat into this before I start fucking monologuing. How have we found this part of the year?
See, here's the thing, okay?
Okay.
I have a feeling that I knew this was coming, but it's because I'm always at a low point during summer / spring. So for me, it's like, it's approaching this like mid-peak summer. I'm gonna feel like shit, But this is worse than normal. You're happier in these months, so I'm a bit like, something's in the air.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like me and you are in just very similar positions in our life at some level. Like, we're not in its entirety, and that never has been the case. But and actually saying all this, I don't think our problems are the same either. Like, I'm thinking now about the issues that I'm facing, and I don't think they're the same ones. We just have some extra things that we're both we both agree upon, like jobs, for example, where we're where we want to kind of get going somewhere, but we feel very trapped, and all these other sorts of things.
In fairness, that is a big problem, though. So it is a big problem we do share.
It's true. It's a very materialistic one. Which makes sense. Not materialistic. It's a very material problem.
It is.
In certain ways.
Like we had like there was no kids back at school yet, so we had what's called insert day, and people come in, they give us talks, we do like activities like team building and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So the woman come in who's like, funny enough,
God, yeah.
Jesus Christ. We had I can't get over you laughing at me saying we had a woman come in. Just like those sarcastic sexism. I was like, I just caught me really off guard. I don't know why. Yeah, we had a woman come in, and she was like handing out these papers about how we feel in the workplace, and it's about resilience in the workplace. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And then we had to like fill out what our values were and our strongest to weakest. So we had 6 different ones, and they were like emotional awareness and like positive attitude and mindset and self-care. So self-care was strongest for me, which is surprising in itself. But even in that, I had an issue. I was like, I can't get enough sleep, and I struggle to dedicate time solely for me. Mm-hmm. My weakest was feeling accomplished. So like the sense that what you do matters. I'm just like, wow, it's a long-running platform. It's a long-running position I've had where I go, I don't really matter. Like, I don't really matter to people or to anything.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm doing is very meaningless. That's like a long-running continuation of like, just, not feeling like I'm a part of something core. And it's like, well, yeah, like, I never feel like I'm a key player in a team, I feel like I am a supporting role, or I'm a fringe role, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And like, there's times where I could step up and be like a key player, and I never do it. I tell myself like, oh, we're not gonna do that. That's not for us to do. And it translates to like on the football pitch. I'm like, oh, because I made that run and I didn't get the ball then, I'm not gonna, like, even if I see the opportunity to make that same run and I will probably get the ball this time, I'm not gonna do it. Someone else can do it. So it's like, I don't know where, I'm gonna guess it's like a mixture of fear of failing to make the grade when you step up, but also like the idea of not knowing how to be the key player, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you be the main guy? I was thinking that to myself. I was like watching, I can't remember which team it was. Premier League this weekend. I can't remember which midfielder it was. And he was controlling the whole game and everything went through him. And I was like, whoa, that's like transformative. If you take him out of the team doesn't function. So that's one player affecting 10, but also he's having an effect on the other set of 11 players. So you remove that one player from a game of 22 people and the game changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't even think about having that effect or that impact. Like, and that's crazy. Because there have been times where I've come on as a substitute. Again, I'm a goalkeeper, so, but I have pace and strength on my side. So times I've come on as a substitute and I've pretty much been I'm going to chase you down player.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I made a little impact. Because like, my goal isn't to take the ball from you and score. My goal, like, give you enough of be diabolical enough that you think I'm a war criminal. So then you end up misplacing a pass, and then a better teammate than me will take the opportunity that you've given. But like, there's some guys who I see in the world of football, but also in life, where they get subbed in and they have to come and do something, and they just go, yeah, this is me. Give me the ball. I'm here. And they take it on their back foot. They turn. They spread a pass. I'm like, oh, it's that dynamic movement, you know? And to take it over from football, like, you know that, like, you guys should all have a person who does this, where like, it's not that they take up space or they dominate the room or whatever. No. Like you don't need to do that. It's someone who is just like, this is a problem. Here's me solving the problem. And there's no, like, look at me solving the problem, guys. No. It's like, this is the problem. I'm solving the problem. Boom. Bam. Gone. Like, oh, I say he. But they do whatever they need to do here. The reason why I say he is because I want to be that, you know? So I want people to refer like he. Preferably they'll say they if they're talking about me, but then I have to explain that to them. So then I'm expecting that they'll say he, you know? But yeah, like, that's where I want to be. And there's flashes of it. There's moments of it. But it's not consistent enough. And I think to get there, you need a level of like mental health, like mental strength, I guess, that I haven't had in a while. So then, yeah, I don't know, man.
It's interesting you say a lot of these things, because I do think that there's an element that I've been thinking about recently that's similar to these kinds of ideas. Again, I'm obviously going to probably be projecting on anything you say, because spoiler alert, I've not been feeling great recently. However, obviously not for you, Alex, but everyone else. But some of the things I've genuinely been thinking recently has been almost. Actually, I was going to ask this question when you were talking about not feeling that purpose or not feeling meaning. Was there something nihilistic about it with you, or was it more that you weren't nihilistic, but you just felt like you were getting the short end at the moment?
Yes. I actually don't know. You know, I can't really, like, yeah, I don't know. I actually couldn't tell you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels like, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether it was nihilistic or whether it was more just I think for the first time on this show, I'm at like a point where I don't actually know how to define a feeling.
Okay.
I've just realized I've never had a moment like this where I'm like, someone shoot me. Like, I'm not. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I find that fantastic because that's literally how I feel all the time. I just constantly try to make definitions for it. Like I regularly have no concept of it. But I think that's what I was asking that just because it was interesting the way you phrased it, and I was like, he doesn't necessarily sound nihilistic, but he doesn't also sound, he doesn't immediately, because also you don't come across to me as a nihilistic individual, even though we both been / are depressed or whatever, and we both have had moments in the past of like extreme, again, nihilism not necessarily, but I mean like that extreme feeling of like, what's the fucking point? What is the point of this kind of thing? And the thing I grasp onto, at least, and again bringing this back to the original point I was trying to make, was I've recently been having these very strong, concentrated moments and points where I'm like, am I just wrong about everything? Like, I've very recently been thinking, and I genuinely don't know if some of my feelings about the world just feel wrong. And I mean that, and I'm trying to say this in a not nihilistic sounding way, because it's not me, because even though it's coming across that way, I think it's because it's just very tiring. And it's one of those problems. And the thing is, I think I've also experienced this in my life at multiple times, where I'm struggling to feel the weight of my own mind's thoughts. I said, I guess the right way of saying it is the justifications my mind has come up for many things can no longer structurally hold up the weight and burden that life has on it. And beforehand, I used to be able to like kind of restructure or remake these things, whether easily or just because it didn't take much energy, or whether I was ignorant enough that it made it easy for me to do so. Like, it just wasn't that hard because there was just almost less pressure. But now I feel like more than ever, there are cases where I'm like, there's certain aspects of me where I'm just like, I genuinely don't know in my own head whether some notion of my personality or some notion of how I want to get things done or how I want things to be, or even, to be perfectly honest, like empathy towards myself in a way, like a kind of the kind of self-serving, no, actually not self-serving, I suppose, because that is a bit of a weird way of describing it. I wouldn't want to describe self-serving as empathy, but the part of me that's about like giving a shit about myself is almost being rocked a bit in a very different way at its core. I genuinely don't know how much of that is made up of ideas that are so bullshit that I am actually harming myself constantly and passive. Like, I'm not saying, like, for example, I still do think that getting rid of YouTube would be one of the best things for me going forward. I do believe that. I struggle with it, but I do believe at least it's happening. I would agree with my own process that passively I think it's causing me issues, which is why it's passively causing me issues, even though I don't want it to, right? I believe it is, and I know that it is because it is. I'm seeing it, I'm experiencing it, I'm feeling it. No one can tell me that that's not happening, because also, more than anything, it's taken me a very long time to come to that conclusion, and also to understand it in that way, to not just understand it with regards to myself, but also understand it within a larger philosophical framework, to try and understand, to understand that I, as a human being, I shouldn't rely on I shouldn't rely on my ability to just make choices to expect that results will just happen differently because I want them to. I'm an animal. I'm a human being. I'm just going out. I don't believe in free will that much. And I don't believe that relying on it either helps particularly, because I think I did for a very long time, and I don't think it has helped. And again, that's not me wanting to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's also come with a lot of philosophical ideas and a lot of stuff that I think is truly fine. And I don't think that believing that you have free will or believing you don't, for example, has made me happier one way or the other. I also don't think that learning those things have made me happier, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it to. But if there was any part of me that thought, if I just learn something, I will just become better in a sort of Hegelian. I'm going to talk a lot about different things here. So if this is becoming confusing or a bit too jargony for people, I really do apologize. But I'm now like floodgating all of this. Apparently, there's something Hegelian and idealistic about the idea of like, oh, if we just learn the right thing, then everything will suddenly feel better and great. There's something almost like finding serenity or peace with that notion that I'm not quite sure I can quite get to yet. Right? Like I'm not saying that there is that has no benefit. I'm just saying that like I don't think I'm there. I don't think that's the issue I'm having so much. I think there are other issues. But right back to that beginning of that statement, even though I'm happy to believe or still engage with that kind of with the idea that I have about that. But there are certain things about me, my passive existence and the way I feel about things in the past that I've maybe thought about for sure, but have never quite understood how to make sense of. And now I'm starting to break that down in a way that's, I think, it's not causing me harm at all. It's causing me it's causing me to have to go through a sort of weird metamorphosis of thought. And a metamorphosis of energy. Like, you can tell me how you feel about what I'm about to say, because I genuinely don't know how stupid this is, or whether this is incredibly wise, or this is like baby steps, and it's taken me a long time to get to it. So, here, if I've had chats with you on many occasions about identity, we have spoken about this on many occasions. Not as much on the podcast, I think, but we have in real life spoken a lot about it. And I've always had issues with identity. I still have issues with identity. I truly don't even understand what identity means, really, beyond kind of talking about cause and effect, which is, again, going back to like determinism and go away from free will. Which I still believe with this thing that I'm about to say, it's still true. But anyway, I don't think that changes in any way. But there was something that occurred to me very, very recently that has shaken me is really not the right way of saying it. It's more like there's a part of me that's going, if this is true, how the fuck have I been so genuinely naive to all of it? Which is that I think, and I do have a potential reason. I think that I grew up and felt that who I am, and more importantly, like the feelings of who I would, the feeling of myself as a person and so on, the actions I partake in and so on, would come naturally to me, would feel natural. Like I live in a very natural way in that sense of, I experience things, and therefore, after experiencing them, I, react in the way that you'd expect. And I think I've talked about this before with the idea of like, wanting to live in a way that is active as opposed to passive. You don't want to, it would be better to live in a way in which you felt in control rather than the world just happening at you and happening to you. And then it kind of like struck me, what if I follow that logic to its conclusion, or if I kind of take that a step further and I think to myself, so the implication almost becomes now that I realize that living, like having your personality or having a personality almost in that way that we think of it is a constant state of war. It's a constant state of it's essentially much like many things. It's a struggle for existence. It's a struggle for some sort of thing to exist that otherwise doesn't. The idea that like if I'm having any sort of control, I have to actively make some sort of gesture towards something, and that is in conflict in many ways with what the world is going to be throwing at me. I was literally thinking about this because, having failed recently with YouTube, with not watching YouTube, to be clear, for those who aren't aware of what I'm referring to, I did watch some people, but I did see some good stuff. Again, YouTube is not a thing I think it's innately bad. I'm not going to continue with that. It's just I eventually will reach the number of episodes where I will never ever refer to this again, like in my old sense of why. It's just I need to now, because we did it last episode and I realized it was probably necessary. But the thing is that I remember when I was watching them and I was thinking to myself, like, you know, whether I was listening to the jokes they were making or I was listening to the way they were with each other and stuff, and it just started and there was just this weird thing which I started to build up, which was, these people don't make sense in my head, as far as they seem like they are in such a good way compared to me. But even if I had whatever they had, I also know I couldn't deal with the things they're dealing with. Or a better way of saying it is, I don't think that my personality would be able to survive the issues they are dealing with and have had to deal with as I am now. And I know that they've obviously got support to bring them up, but that's not a net zero situation. Does that make sense? Like, the idea of, like, if you have a force like pushing in one direction and a force pushing in another direction, it's net zero relative to anything else, but there's still two forces happening. There's still a downward and an upward pressure, which means there's always a constant state of resistance. There's always a clash. There's always a point of, there's always a, I'm trying to think of a really nice synonym, but I can't right now. So if you can think of a really good one, please do for me. But there's this battle that's constantly happening in order to be one thing or another. But what's interesting again is that, yeah, that might be true, but in theory, if it was like, you know, because I wouldn't say my life is much better than many other people in the world. And it's not fair. It would not be fair for me to say that, like, because I have issues, that means I have worse lives than other people. It's a very difficult, complicated thing. I don't really care for it, and I don't want to. But there's always this notion I have sometimes where I'm like, I don't enjoy my life, and I think that maybe some people I'm aware of do enjoy their life more. And I've also spoken to people where I am aware that seems to be the case. It's not always clear that I'm being told the truth, but this is the problem with living in a world where people will hide information from you, right? The main point I want to keep bringing up, though, is that constant need of doing of the fight or the resistance or the need to battle for one's own personality, essentially. And then once I started saying that, I realized that there's certain privileges I have that have meant I've never done this thing. In many ways, like growing up, I didn't grow up in like a super rich family or anything, but as a general rule, I've been fine, like, especially after a certain point. And also, I want to be clear, I'm also not saying any of this I'm not saying all of this to put firm blame entirely on myself, because firstly, privilege isn't a blame. That's not a blame on someone. That's a reality of someone's situation. It's not my fault that I was in a certain state, right? I can't help that. As a kid, I grew up a certain way. On top of that, but also, I also do recognize that there are challenges I have. You know, I do have challenges mentally that, in theory, come from this thing called autism or Asperger's syndrome, however you'd like to call it. I honestly don't give a shit. I came to it too late to have a particular opinion, and I'm also not well versed in the kind of the spaces around this. I was going to say political spaces, but it's not, which I guess it is, but I don't mean it to sound that way. I just mean like the spaces, like the mental health spaces of this and neurodivergent spaces to kind of talk about this in a way that actually is quite nuanced, I guess is the right way of saying it. I'm still wildly ineffective at understanding my own neurodivergence, which I don't really mind. I don't know how to explain it, but some people go their whole life without it and clearly are neurodivergent. Then they don't never have a diagnosis, so who knows? It's just one of those things. And it's that part of me but it's the part of me that thinks like I grew up in a situation where I didn't have a struggle too much in that regard to like kind of form myself as a person specifically. I didn't find, I reached a point at school where I didn't need to struggle. And specifically as well, I should point out, I never really worked hard outside of school. I just enjoyed school. So I was genuinely experiencing naturally school, and then outside of school, I didn't do anything, right? Again, none of this is to do with me saying that like I didn't have addiction to TV or any other sorts of things, which I did have, that would affect this and affect my life and so on. I don't want anything I say to be understood as the full gospel of what I'm saying. I'm just giving small parts to it. I'm also, being clear about it, I am a white person. I don't have to think about my identity in that regard. I've also grew up feeling male and specifically as a man, even though I was never a man, but we get the idea. I never had to really think about myself in that way. I didn't have to think about anything when I started being interested in women. I never had to think about my own person or whatever. It just occurs to me that I've never actually had to make myself. I've never had to form my own identity, really. I've never really had to fight for who I am, if that makes sense.
I always wonder, like, do you think that other people fight for their identity?
I don't know. I'm not saying other people do. I get the feeling that I haven't, though. And I get the feeling that people at a certain level are. And that's a kind of the question. That's essentially the question I posit. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't know if this is stupid or something, or if there is some kernel of truth, or if this is, and there's almost a part of me that says, are some people in positions that we would call successful, and I don't mean rich, and I don't mean famous, I don't mean those sorts of success, but like personal success, like, the way that me and you might look at certain people that we idolize in some way, or people that just kind of confound us in the way that you described of being like a person who doesn't dominate and take up space in a room yet is massive, right? Has meaning unto themselves, that they are not like they're not throwing it in your face. It's just you can't help but look at it, right?
Yeah,
you
but
can't
I
help
wouldn't even call
feel
that.
it.
I wouldn't call that person successful. I'll call the action that they did a success. But at the end of the day, like, the reason why I speak about the guy that changes the whole game is because, like, that person, they, in that moment, but as things go, as things go, like, after he's had that moment, or after they've had that moment, now we're talking about a general example here, now they've had that moment, then what? Like, that's,
To be clear, I that's also not what I'm referring to, because I'm not referring to just the moment of success. When I say successful, I mean in almost the broadest, most kind of abstract sense of successful. Like, I don't like, it's not something that like I'm pointing at a number. I'm not pointing at like, oh, their success in X. I'm not even saying they're super competent. I'm saying people who have that kind of. I'm saying people who have essentially found, I guess the right way of saying it is some genuine sense of happiness, if that makes sense, or a genuine sense of real, and more than just happiness, but like happiness that is beyond them and includes other people, right? Because of the notion of who they are being something that is in. I don't like using the word in tune, but it's the notion of that makes sense of in tune with others and the rest of the world. that there isn't a sense that there isn't like kind of a natural they're not falling into place, they are carving out their place, and in doing so become part of it, right? It's not and it's weird, but the notion there is that there is resistance always, that it is not a case that they just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Because the whole point is that if something bad happened, if there was a crisis, if there was something that happened in life, then that person who just randomly fell into place, who didn't have to try and that was naturally, quote unquote, a good fit. Those are literally the kinds of people who, in moments of crisis, just completely break and turn into different people because they never had to be anything before, and then they suddenly turn into something else but the people who I'm talking about are the kinds of people who don't break in those moments. They're people who are like, no, I understand. This is not a test for me. I'm already fighting for this space. This new thing changing the space around me doesn't matter because I didn't need the ground to hold me here. I'm holding myself to the ground. Do you know what I mean? Like there's that level of that's what I mean. And there are just people who I find fascinating in that way, whether it be someone like a Carla, whether it, to an extent, someone like my brother, even at a very young age, I feel quite strongly about who he is as a person. And I can say this about different people. We could start making a list, and the problem with that list is that we start to get into territory where I'm not sure I know enough about one person or another, even though I get the feeling I might know that they would be on that list. I don't know enough about them to actually say that that's true, if you know what I mean. It's very difficult. That would get into sort of parasocial, I believe I understand the person even though I don't, right? Territory that gets a bit mucky and weird.
Yeah. Well, in essence, like, because what you're saying doesn't sound unique. It also doesn't sound. I think a lot of people will probably be able to resonate with what you're saying. A lot of people will also be able to feel like they have no idea what you're saying. I think it's all coming from like where you view it, like as, you know. I don't think structurally what you're saying is a weird thing. I don't think it's a foreign concept or anything like that. I think it's more the opposite. But like, I kind of want to hone in on the carving like your own space out. Like the idea of it. I think, because I think we all do it. I think we actually all carve our own space out in the world. But it's about how we view the space we're carving. So it's like, do we feel like we can carve a big space or a small space? And what do we actually have the confidence to carve? And are we worried that what we carve is going to cut into somebody else's carving? Like, so I think there's people who don't think about those things. There's people who do think about those things. And then there's people who don't think at all and they just go wild. And there's people who's in between all of them. Like, I think I'm very much in between all of them, where I don't really care, I do care, I half care, half don't care. And it's like, it's very difficult to actually pinpoint what you're actually trying to carve. So, and it's a part of it, like the nihilistic nature, that like, if you're not a part of something and you're not with something, you don't believe in something, sometimes you have a tendency to just destroy some things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's and like the idea of it is a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing to look at a structure and to look at a system and go, I want to burn it down. So that also builds towards like who you are as a person. You might look at a part of your life and go, I want to burn this all down. Like, I want to do something completely different. And it could be something as simple as you're sat and you're at a job you don't like. And you see a structure in place where you wake up every day, you do the same thing, you speak to the same people, you get the same overground at the same time. You know, your idea of a thrill is when you get a line bike down a hill, you know, and you just go, this is a structure. I don't believe in anything that I'm doing. There's no meaning behind anything, but I'm burning it all down. I'm burning it all down. I'm moving to Bali and I'm going to start spearfishing, you know, like that it can be as small or as big as you want it to be. That's how I view it. So I don't believe it's a super foreign concept. None of it, actually. But I believe that the way you've expressed it might be fairly different. And maybe people don't see it from that viewpoint or that idea.
I also feel like the word carve is messing what I mean up as well, because I think that carve is insinuating forming out of the environment. Like, how do I say this? Like forming out of the environment something, right?
It doesn't have to be.
Well, I'm saying that that's an association I have with it, like the idea of digging, right? It's how I feel about it, or the idea of, you know, carving a statue out of stone, right? Which, don't get me wrong, I can understand someone's appreciation of like becoming of a personality or something being about carving out of stone or whatever. But I'm not even really saying that. I'm not like saying chipping away to make a defined notion of something like that. It's more amorphous and more bizarre than that, and that's where I think I'm losing it. But the thought to me of someone who is actively trying to, essentially the person who is always at war within, like, to make sure that the personality they have is something that is active, is one who, well, I mean, beyond just the practice of that, the ease at which that will eventually come to you, so much that it feels natural, but at least some, or passive. But the person who never stops doing that, and to be clear, that's a very difficult thing to even describe, because you can't describe yourself as finding describing yourself as making yourself is kind of a problem. Is already a problem that you can see, like, because how do you determine that? How do you do that? What's the mechanics by which, like, a person can just be a thing? Like, the way that you do it, the way you would is by reacting to very specific things in a specific way. Like, that's really what I mean, right? In terms of, you build up a list of, in your own head almost, or within your natural state of being, of how you want to act. There's loads of media that we have both watched where a person who talks about living a lie, or a person who talks about, you know, and lots of stuff about people in Hollywood, for example, or like within the idea of film and being actors, of, like, you know, very obviously this is like a big thing of films or whatever, but the idea of, like, yeah, I'm a person who, you know, the show must go on kind of style idea, where it's like, I push other things to the side, I just force myself to react to something in a way that is blank. And I'm not saying that is necessarily good. If the topic of this podcast is about mental health, then I think we know of many, many examples of where that's not a good thing, right? So it's not me trying to boil down this idea that I'm having, where I'm fundamentally, like, where this feeling that something would be natural to me and that I'm just being myself, quote unquote, and struggling to make sense of that in a world in which I see things needing to be created and to be formed in order to actually be something worthwhile. And also that natural things, it's a fallacy to say that natural things are naturally good things. I don't believe that to be true. So where is the line? Or what's the... It would be fair to say it's going to be complicated, and I'm not pretending it isn't. It's just one of those things that's really scratching, like itching me at the moment. And it's not, and it's, unfortunately, it's just the reality of someone who is not felt good recently and is not knowing how to deal with that outside of introspection, because introspection is the way that I am able to stop those bad feelings from spiraling into total negativity. No, Kez, go away. And that kind of, the basis for that is just difficult for me to comprehend, because it occurs to me that I don't know to what extent I have really, like you said, like, I think we all carve all the time, or that we are always carving our place in the world. I don't know if you can actually, I don't know if I can agree with it. I genuinely don't know if I can, because while that comes down, like I guess it depends what we both mean by that notion philosophically and just semantically. Like, what do I mean when I say forming oneself in that way, and what do you mean when you say that, where it's when, you know, or when we're talking about carving into the world, our place in the world, you know, by acting I am carving my place in the world, even if it's very, very passive. Inaction is still action. But do we argue that I'm actively trying to do anything? Well, I'm not actively trying to do anything. So there's an agreement I would have with you, if this is where we were going with it, that you are saying, well, we are having an impact and we are being a person, we are doing something. That I don't disagree with. But I think it occurs to me that what you're describing is the more true objective notion of what's actually happening. Whereas I'm almost trying to describe that I don't have an identity, not really, while I'm being that passive. Essentially, that's not an identity, or that's not a personality. That's a blank robot. That's a biological machine of nothingness. That's a thing running on pure instinct, which ultimately is not how I would describe a human being of, I don't know if this is harsh or not, but this is just what initially occurred to me to say. So I don't know whether to say it or not. But it almost comes to me as, it doesn't really give me the feeling of a person with substance, of a human being with substance to them, which I realize is me saying that of myself. That's a personal take as much as all of this is a personal take, headline, subtitle, all of that. But what I mean is that that's a personal take of myself just as much as it's a personal take of a notion of people. And that means that I don't, and this all comes down, I feel like so much of this comes down to my lack of knowledge. Like, so much of this comes down to the fact that I do not know. And I want people to talk to me about this. I almost want to try and understand how people are. But again, I also know that I've spoken to people, and lots of people either don't, like, have no idea, or lots of people, and when I say no idea, is then I mean they don't ever think about it. So they listen to me and they're like, I'm not willing to go philosophically in this direction at all, because it's just not something I've ever pondered, and I have no interest in pondering it, which is fine. Not saying they have to, just that's not satisfying. Or people will say, oh, it has come naturally to me, which again doesn't fill me with much hope, because it still feels like, okay, so if you're an example of someone who is naturally felt into a position where they feel like things are going well, then in my mind, now you're someone who eventually will at some point be challenged, and that challenge will just spiral you out of control. If I'm following this to the conclusion, and again, I'm not sold on this. It's just I'm unable to calculate like any of this because there's no evidence of it really. This is a abstract idea about people, and is a generalization, because it's not this is not a case by case notion. This is an idea of a generalization. But I'm just struggling to I'm almost struggling to format what I'm even saying. So it's very clear that I don't know what I'm talking about. But there's a feeling there that I want to get across, and I don't know if anyone else knows what I mean by that. Oops.
Yeah, I don't like. I think it's well, I think this discussion in general kind of highlights the beauty of not only the show but conversations in general, because there is no end point to this. It's one of those things where it's very open ended, and it's a lot of it's down to interpretation and to just what you want to see in the world and how you want to impact and how you want to. All of this comes down to your own perception of what things should be, rather than I don't know, where there's no standard bearing, there's no like seal of approval stick to get. So it's like it's never like no one's ever got the exact same outlook on things either, which I always find a funny thing when oh yeah, like I met this girl and she views life the exact same the way I do. It's like she doesn't, and you don't either, because I think we all view life in a very unique way. We may follow trends. We may follow like phases. We might follow very similar people. But I think as it comes down to it, I think you see this most in like moral dilemmas, how people react to certain things. Like a very interesting thing is like who's caught up in politics and who isn't. And the people who choose to be like, I'm not dealing with this, I'm not paying attention to it, and people who chose to be fairly like delving deep into it. And it's really funny because the people who I thought would be like balls deep effectively into this are the ones who are hiding away, because their values and their well, the way that they view life is different to the way somebody else might view it, who I know, or myself even. And it's like, that's where there's a divergence. That's where there's a difference. So it's like, or even who you sympathize with is another one. Like, I think about the protest, the far right riots happened recently, and a lot of things I've been hearing is people saying that they've not been listened to. And I always think to myself, the people who are here say that is people who are sympathizing with them. It's like, I know it's wrong, but they've just not been listened to. I'm thinking, cool. How did you reach that point where you're like I thought we think similarly about life. So how are you finding sympathy in that? And you start to, but there's divergence. That's where like our lives aren't lived similarly. So and then it kind of peels its way back. But then those are very situational based. You still don't know how that person actually feels about life itself, which I think is just a very difficult conversation.
Mm.
So, yeah. I don't know. I feel like we're like philosophy bros right now.
I genuinely do feel, and yeah, I mean, this is about to be very philosophy bro. I really wish that this was how do I say this? I really wish that people were more I wish I could talk to more people who I think would actually have an informed opinion on something. Like,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying I'm great at that, but I don't think but I can't almost blame my life for that, considering how many people around me haven't. Like, if we lived in a world where we had that level of informed ideas about things, or at least had people kind of think on things such that they could form opinions about, about these ideas, then I feel like we would have I feel like we would be so much further ahead in terms of the ideas we could come up with to explain things, or that we would at least agree that we've reached a point of meaningful of meaning in which we can agree, like, yeah, this is working. Like, we can understand collectively and agree collectively at some level that even if we do disagree about things, that we have reached a kind of I forget what the word is, but it begins with a C. It basically means a compromise. A compromise about how we should view things and experience things. And the reality is that I know that people have opinions all the time. So technically this is happening. I'm just saying, I wish that it was a more informed thing. I just wish that people actually were informed.
Yeah, because I guess a lot of conversations feel like they have to end with somebody winning the conversation, having the upper hand in the conversation, rather than being coming together, or it's a compromise of like ideas and being, hey, we're both cool. We're both doing something cool here.
Yeah, we each disagree with each other, but I can see you're trying. Like, and I'm trying. So therefore, this is a good thing that was happening. And I've had those conversations with people in my life. But there are, and I just wish that, like, right now, with the way that I feel, I wish I could go up to someone, chat to them, and be like, hey, can you help me with this? Or do you have any way, like, with the notion, with seemingly you have an idea about how you feel, or seemingly I'm almost talking about you. Would you mind being able to explain to me what it is I might be missing, or whatever? Because I would love if other people would ponder. I mean, I guess it's just I'm asking for people to do what I do, but I'm asking. I wish that people would ponder on these kinds of things in the way that I wish I could. Like, it's not just a case of I because I ponder. Like I ponder on things, but there's things I can't ponder on properly because I don't have that. I can't, like when I'm self-introspective, there are times where I'm being self-introspective because I'm trying to understand something completely unbeknownst to me. And I'm going, why is that? Do I not understand this? And then the other one is, oh, there's this thing. Can I try and figure out why? Like, as in there's a why and then there's a how that's almost happening. Like, but it's a, how is it possible to think X given how I think? And then it's, why is it that I think X given how I think? Like and those are two totally different ideas. And some people can think about things. And I feel like I'm completely absent from some of that. And, for whatever reason that may be, environmental or natural, I don't care. Like nature or nurture, I don't care. Like it's just the fact that I can't means I wish that when I spoke to people, it just means I wish I could speak to people and see that. Like the fact that I'm like, the things I've been looking at recently to try and get me out of the funk was literally looking at like science, mathematics, stuff that genuinely is like the most divine thing that human beings have ever done, right? The kinds of, well, and maybe not there are lots of things that are divine that human beings do, in my opinion, but like I find these to be some of the most incredible things that humans have been able to achieve, right? And I love to listen to people who are informed talk about these things. It's one of the most amazing things in the world, because you know what's so great about people talking about scientific stuff, for example, when they're all being really informed about what they're talking about, is that the story fits. like when they talk about one thing, it fits to another thing, which fits to another thing, which fits to another thing, and it fits very well and is testable and validable and validate, and you can validate it and demonstrably show that it happens repetitively and doesn't not happen and so on. And when it doesn't, then you look back and you change the story to fit what the new model shows and blah blah blah. The fact that it doesn't feel, it's not hypocritical of course I do mean this in an informed and nuanced sense, because there are definitely times in quote unquote science where people have, for political reasons, made up bullshit. But this is, I was talking about like craniology and other sorts of like racist shit and things like that, and also times in psychiatry and so on, where there were periods of in existence of this discussion where it wasn't very scientific, for example, or even attempting. Not really. Like they always make themselves seem like it because a bunch of rich people generally doing all of these. In the past, it was always rich people doing sciencey stuff because they could afford it and they had the time to do it. They didn't have to do anything else. It's always the little thing that always gets forgotten a lot of the time. Not everyone, but a lot of the time this is true. Again, going back, I enjoy those things, and it's when I'm listening to that stuff, it's wonderful listening to it. And then there's just that little bit where I'm like, it's a shame that I can't talk to someone about what I'm trying to explain and have someone say something to me that just opens my eyes, because what they've said is actually a profound thing. Because it feels like in some ways like that science exists as this sort of, the scientific sphere exists as this enigma of attempt to kind of fabric out an understanding of things. And I feel like at a certain level, social theory, and I mean that at a personal level, like the person's opinion about the world and how it should be, what's right and wrong, philosophy, ethics, aesthetics, the other category that I'd never remember, metaphysics, like all of that sort of stuff is, I feel like we don't have enough conversations, and there's so much we have learned in the past that people don't know now, that it's, including myself, but I know far more than some people. And it just surprises me at some level, or it doesn't surprise me. It just makes me sad. I think that's what it comes down to. I'm just saddened by that, because I just wish that there was someone who could help me in the way that I think I could help someone else. but I don't think that I can get that help. And that means I don't think I can help other people because I'm not in the space to be able to do it, if you know what I mean. Like, the ways in which we can all get together and cooperatively help each other is immense. We are incredible at being able to do that. And again, next to like science and maths, it's like one of the most divine things that humans can possibly do. Arguably, it is the most divine thing we can do is cooperation and love and all this other stuff. But I don't know. It's not an I don't know. It's just I don't see that enough. And I think that there is a personal that's a personal flaw in the sense that there are reasons I don't see it as much as maybe other people do. I'm not pretending it doesn't exist, but I'm sad it doesn't exist more, and I'm sad that it's not. And I'm sad that when we're in a position where people are arguing in ways that I feel like show the ignorance that does exist. And I feel like I'm not getting enough of the other side coming to rescue it. So I don't know, it's challenging.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I think maybe it's down to, it's gonna be that episode where I don't really have like anything concrete to offer. I think because of how there's in terms of response to what you're saying, not in general, just because it all makes a version of sense.
Yeah, I'm also not asking. I'm not asking anything like properly. I'm stating.
I know.
I'm whining.
That's what I mean. Like, that's what I mean. Like I don't really have anything to offer in return because of how broad it is and how like it's impossible to kind of narrow it down in a way. Well, it's very possible, just that I don't feel like I want to in that sense. Like, It does make me think about the art of conversation though, and like how hard it is to reach this point with somebody. Like, the things that we're discussing it seems like these aren't conversations you have with your mates after playing football, you know? Because we were talking about this the other day, like on our late night phone call because we've been discussing about the future of the show and all that stuff. So advertising has come up a lot because, money. And even though we're quite far away from it, or maybe we're not as far as we seem, those discussions come up because they will be relevant at some point. So it's like, how we go about with advertising, what's the right way to do it, is there a right way to do it? And like Joe has an idea, I have an idea. And in reality, we both want the exact same thing. We just want to take a different route to get there. But even on that route to get there, it's going to be pretty much the exact same way. And all the time, it just comes back down to what step do you want to take? The step to the left, the step to the right, the step to the far left, the step to the far right. And I don't mean political, I mean literally in direction. So it's like, this episode of Silly Words is brought to you by UKIP. Like, but things like that, because at the core of it, it's like when brands, we've all seen brands approach like content creators, YouTubers, and other podcasts, and they're brands that are unethical and don't really preserve the sanctity of life for the people who help them produce the products in which they're selling. And things like that. And my viewpoint, and as is Joe's, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong and you're actually a genocidal maniac, Joe. Those companies aren't in our mind to say yes to, which is why a better help will probably never be able to work with us.
Depends on how much money, but
I can't with better help. So, which is funny.
I agree with you, though. Sorry, to be clear.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like, it's really funny that the main mental health platform that is used by people and like chill by everybody, we can never be sponsored by. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of your show? To create like an accessible way for people to talk about them, like mental health struggles and things like that, and just to encourage mental health discussions, but also like as a diary for ourselves. So in 10 years, somebody can look back on this, or Jesus Christ, one of our kids can look back at it and go, "Hey, yeah, our parents were dumb. Like, you know,
Yeah.
the show can fit multiple reasons, but BetterHelp can never be a sponsor just because of what they are and what they actually believe in and the reason why it was conceived in the first place. Like, that's a really funny feeling for me. And that might end up rubbing off into other like brands as well. And there have been actually like easily available offers for sponsors even at this low level of our podcast. But
Sure. Yeah.
like we could like do you know of like NFT style advertising that like I've been offered by Reddit messages? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Oh, like here's this match 3 game and you can win NFTs. I'm like, are we in 2022? Like, still. Like the amount of like crypto bros who like, hey, join our thing and we'll give you this amount of our coin. I'm like, Jesus. So yeah, we could sell our souls very quickly here. But it doesn't feel like that is where the show should go. It doesn't feel like that's where my heart really wants to go. Maybe Joe is like a crypto bro in disguise. Who knows? But like, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it fulfills the purpose that this show or us as individuals or us as a collective have in mind. You know?
Yeah. No, unfortunately, my experience of life has told me that the point of doing those things is utter bullshit, and we should try to do better than that.
So this
I just mean,
episode,
I just mean about crypto in general. By the way, I'm not. You know, I'm not. I don't want to come across as the person who just like is outright saying like no, because I understand it. And yes, I do understand it. I understand the point of it and how it works. I even understand actual ways in which it could be useful. I just know that that's not what people are doing, and it's
yeah.
and the point of why people would tell you to invest in it, beyond the fact that they're telling you to invest in it for their own purposes, is the fact that investing is purely for the purposes, in this case, of just making money back. It's got nothing to do with actually making anything better. And to me, that's such a useless use of energy in life. And I just think that the fact that so many people are interested in just that and that alone is equivalent to a disease. It's a disease that humanity has. Like it's a poison, in my opinion.
Well, it's not a disease. It's called gambling addiction. Like people who are interested in crypto for like the idea of coins and things like that. It's a gambling addiction. You're paying, and you're like, here's the thing. There's guys who can game a system.
To be clear, I was also expanding that beyond cryptocurrency for a second, because I was just talking about the idea of how much of the desire for making money and profit. But I won't disagree with what you're saying right now.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make that clear.
Like the idea of it all, what you're doing, like you can game the system. That's not an addiction. There's people who will invest in every coin possible and hope that it picks up, and they never really do because there's so many coins and so many like scams and things like that. And it's actually crazy how scary the world of cryptocurrency is as well. But also, as you said, like expanding it out further, just there's a lot of things in the world where they have purpose in them, but we'd never see the good purpose. Like I think that cryptocurrency can be a great thing, but as long as there's people around who want to game a system, and as long as there's not a need for it mainstream, then it will always be like a dark horse. Like I own cryptocurrency in like Bitcoin and like Ethereum. And when it rose up the other day, I cashed out and got like £200. It was great. But like, I've never seen it as a necessity, nor have I ever seen it as like a realistic way to make money from it. There's people who I know who has dumped their whole like life savings into it. And it's like, wow. And you start thinking about risk and reward, and you start thinking about the sunken cost fallacy, and that's a whole other topic in itself. But like relating back to the show, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine pushing like a Coinbase platform. Like if Coinbase is like, hey,
yeah, God no,
like you know, And they're a perfectly legitimate company. I have a Coinbase account, but I can't see myself willingly wanting to push that. Even though I use it and I trust it, I can't see myself wanting to actually push it, you know?
Yeah, I have to admit, this is also, I mean, this is getting maybe outside of what we want to talk about, but I did want to say, I think this is almost why I struggle with the idea of advertising in general in relation to this, in relation to this podcast. I think that's almost it. I almost can't even, maybe there does exist some way that I would be okay with it, comfortable with it. Like maybe through, if there was someone else who I really enjoyed and had a relationship with and we cooperated with mutual advertising, I guess, like that form of advertising.
Yeah,
Not
you
like
know.
a like for a like kind of thing, but you get the idea, like something
Well,
like that I could imagine. But
for example, like this is me literally making stuff out of thin air. Like it's something with Critical Role is out and it's available to buy, and like you work with them on a project, like a collaboration video of some sort. You know,
mm-hmm.
like it's Joe from Silly Wales. I'm not gonna be there because I'm shit. But like you know, like like that, and like hey, we're releasing this like I don't know card pack and stuff, and we're gonna play a two shot. I don't help me, but like
Wow,
you know something like that.
wow. Okay,
you know.
you started with card backpack, which is really not the right area to go in. But you did say one shot and two shot, which I guess which are kind of D&D things. So yes,
there we go. Like,
so
and then
you did
you
get
open
there.
the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. You open the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and it's great.
Like, yeah.
Oh dear. But like something like that. Okay, where like there's a mutual benefit because one, you actually like this thing. Two, you actually use this thing. Three, you actually care about like the people who you're working with advertising.
Yeah, it begins to fall into the kind of, so we have to not only would that we have to do that, but that almost becomes social media pointing at itself, or not just social media, but like media pointing at itself kind of thing. I get what you mean, and I'm not against it. I'm not against the idea, for example, of what one of us turns up on another podcast, for example, because they listened to us and they were like, "Hey, we like you guys," or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's gonna happen for sure.
Like that could that could indeed happen, right? I could imagine
it's already happening.
I'm again, it's not one of those like, but it's just a case of like,
it's more how capitalist can we go without corrupting ourselves? Like,
and also what I genuinely, I mean, this is another thing. I don't know what I'm personally comfortable with in general as far as that goes. Like, I think it's become. I think you and me agree that it seems clear that I'm very not. I'm not comfortable with money like that. And
Joe wants this show to be sponsored
or whatever
by hymns.
By hymns, yes.
Yeah. Or AG1.
I don't know what that is. I'm sure that's a little too outside.
Athletic Greens.
Oh no.
Like, hey, you were gunning for a Huel sponsorship in the early days of this show. So, there's still time.
I think I remember saying like I think that's more on the side because I use the product and so on, and I had a good feeling about it at the time. I don't have as good a feeling about it now as I did back then. So I guess that's part of the problem.
Somewhere right now, Ryan is going, "Yep, knew it," and that's it.
But I'm not going to go into why because it's not worth doing.
No, because there's a product that's owned by the same company as Huel that we actually want to work with. We can't burn the bridges we've yet to build. Okay.
No, and to be clear, it's also not me even about the product necessarily. It's just more about like I'm not as hyped up about it as I was previously, and that's all it comes down to.
Also, look at us being really positive about like this in general. Like, we're talking about all this as if it's like a certainty because it is.
Well, we're talking about it because it's a hypothetical about morals and feelings of what we feel is comfortable for us, and relating that to the world that says that it doesn't matter if you don't feel comfortable about it or not, you should do it. Like, that's the problem. And we're kind of stuck in that space, or at least I'm stuck in that space, I think. And I think you are as well. I think we have slightly different variants on it, but we're both very similar in our lack of energy to not enthusiasm. That's the word. Our lack of enthusiasm of it. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I could have talked about today, and I didn't even end up talking about quite a lot of it. But I don't want to keep the episode going longer. And maybe I'll be able to remember it for the next one. But yeah,
because there's also things I haven't covered in this either. I think we took a weird break away, so that we have a lot on our mind. This might be more scatterbrained than normal. But
yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. I think we spent a while away, so now coming back.
Thing is, in your chronological order, I mean, but when I say you, I mean you, the listener. Nothing's actually changed because this is going to come out, I think, just over a week. So everything's still in like a nice chronological order. There will be a video going up onto the Silly Whales YouTube channel, which is just my YouTube channel. It's Cupid. I've been working on this for a month. Not because it's taken a month. It should have taken me half an hour. I've just been that distracted. It's nothing crazy, it's nothing special, but it's a short version of a clip from probably one of our best episodes, which is the anti-racist supercut. But yeah, anyway, that's that. With that being said, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Love you all.